Welcome to today's political forum being brought to you by Whitman Hanson Community Access and Whitman Hanson Express. Now, this forum is going to feature the 4 Whitman Selectmen candidates running for 2 spots on the May 18th town election ballot. The candidates are Brian Bezanson and Scott Lambiase, 2 candidates up for re-election, along with Chris DiOrio and Justin Evans. I'm Kevin Tocci, and I'm going to serve as your moderator, and I'll pose questions along with Tracy Seelye. She is the editor of the Whitman Hanson Express. WHCA's executive director, Eric Dresser, is the forum timekeeper. Now, the forum today is simple. We have opening statements, candidates, question and answers, a brief lightning round, and closing statements. Now, the opening statements, it's 2 minutes for each candidate, and responses to a question is 1. Rebut another candidate's response if they happen to mention you in their comments. You have 30 seconds. The lightning round is going to be a brief answer that could be either yes or no, a choice of whatever the questioner is asking, gives you for choice, or 1 to 2 sentences if needed. Closing statements will be 1 minute for each candidate. Now, the green, as we got Eric here with these color-coordinated cards, tells each candidate when to go. Green, of course, is to, yes, answer the questions. Yellow means your time is nearly up. And red means that your time has expired. If you continue and do not see the signal, well then, the bell will stop you in your tracks. We also ask our audience to refrain from making any remarks or reactions during the forum, and to save all your applause until the end so the candidates can fairly be able to answer their questions. Now, prior to the start of today's forum, we did draw numbers for who will get the opening statement. Of course, whoever got the opening, it's reversed, so to speak, when it comes to closed. As well, it also trickles down, so once we go from the opening statements, the next person in line will get the first question. And so the first person up who draw the number 1 was Chris DiOrio. Chris, you have 2 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Christopher DiOrio. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a practicing trial attorney and law professor, and after 30 years of professional experience solving problems for clients with NGOs and nonprofits, I'm hoping to bring a common sense, compassionate brand of leadership to serve the town of Whitman. Now, I know full well that I'm not from here. I didn't grow up in Whitman, so I may not have the deep generational roots that some people may think is important, but I chose to live in this community. I want to be here. I want to raise my family here. I want my 2-year-old son and his little sister due in July to be able to enjoy all the things that this great community has to offer without worrying about whether we will fall behind other communities. Their future is our future. Whitman has finally started to answer an important question. What kind of town do we want to live in? If we want to grow, to continue to embrace the people and places that keep our town a desirable place, to raise our children, to bring families, and to build businesses, we cannot be afraid to take the steps necessary to sustain our future with a solid financial and capital plan, not just for next year, but for the next 5 years or 10 years to prepare for our future needs. We have to be better stewards for our future, our children, to ensure that our schools can help them be competitive in a changing market. We cannot have educators and firefighters and police and other civil servants walking on eggshells every year wondering if this is the year they lose their job. We have to pay attention to our library and our senior center, the 2 entities that serve the fastest growing parts of our local population. The old politics of stay the course and stand pat over the past decade has resulted in a continuing financial crisis in Whitman. In my 3 years on the Finance Committee, I've seen that the easy choice of applying temporary fiscal bandages to the bleeding has done nothing to solve the underlying problem. We need leadership that is able to make hard decisions about the future, that isn't bound to the way we've done things in the past. We can make this change, and we will.
Thank you, Chris. That's Chris DiOrio. Up next is Brian Bezanson. Brian, you have 2 minutes.
Well, my name is Brian Bezanson. I'm an incumbent running for re-election. I've been on the board since 2004. I'd like to thank WHCA and Whitman Hanson Express for hosting this event to show everybody exactly where we stand on every part of this crisis that we're in. When I ran back in 2004, I ran with the idea that I could make a difference. Now, I have been here most of my life. My family came here in 1960. And when I was young, I learned the art of volunteerism. And that's what I had in my system as I grew older. I was past president of the Whitman JC's 2 terms, and that's all about volunteerism and making sure you grow up to be good humans. And that's exactly how I ran every year and how I did business every year. It's all about making the lives of the citizens, taxpayers, seniors, veterans, and families the best it can be in Whitman. Now, I know that this has been a tough year, but there's been other communities that are in this. We are not singled out to be in this. Franklin has a $2.5 million cut to their schools this fiscal year. It's happening everywhere. The cost of doing business with the services that we have are not staying with the receipts that we get. We have to find new ways to get revenue, keep our costs low, and keep the services up that citizens want. That's what I'm about. That's all I'm about. I do not bring politics into this building. This is about the citizens and the community and what's best for everyone. And that's exactly how I will continue to operate.
That is Brian Bezanson with his opening statement. Up next is Scott Lambiase. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Scott Lambiase. I've been a Whitman resident for about 20 years. I would come here years ago to visit my sister and her children. I really found myself drawn to this town. It's a beautiful park. It has the great downtown, and I always notice this wonderful sense of community. I have 2 wonderful children that I both being brought up here and born here. They're both in the Whitman Hanson school system. My daughter Taylor is 16. She goes to the high school. My 12-year-old son is in the middle school. And I've had quite a bit of involvement in this community over the years. I've coached my daughter's teams, soccer teams, with Whitman Youth Soccer, and I volunteered for many a Duval School Fun Day, which was a lot of fun. And still today, I'd be found down at the baseball fields with my kids and watching my daughter play lacrosse. Years before I got on the Board of Selectmen, I was a Whitman Auxiliary Police Officer. I really enjoyed walking through the town and a nice Sunday morning, watching people cross to the church and getting to meet everybody. I've been a member of the Board of Selectmen for the last 7 years, and I feel very privileged to have been allowed to be a steward on this, on this board and a steward of this community. I think we have done some good work over the years. When I'm not in Whitman, I'm typically in Duxbury. I work there. I work for the town as the Director of Municipal Services. My duties include all the procurement for the town. I do all the purchasing, and I'm in charge of all special projects. I'm liaison for the town manager to most committees. I oversee all the licensing, permitting, inspections. I deal with the Affordable Housing Trust. I handle all the land leases and dispositions, and I coordinate with all the department heads and work on development of the capital program and capital purchases. I've been in Duxbury for about 15 years working, and when I got in the Board of Selectmen here, it was with the hopes that I would use some of that knowledge and the tools that I have from there. So, we do apply the best financial management practices there, and I hope to apply them here, and I hope you'll remember that on Election Day.
Time's up. If you've run out of time answering questions, that you can use your closing statement for. Next is Justin Evans. You have 2 minutes, Justin.
Thank you. Thanks, Kevin, Tracy, and Eric for hosting this, and thank you to my fellow candidates for the service each of you have given the town of Whitman. My name is Justin Evans, and I'm running to be your next selectman. I grew up in town during a time of transition. I went to the Holt School before it closed, and then attended Duval for a year. I went to Whitman Middle, and then spent 1 year in the old high school before the new one opened up, and I eventually graduated from there. I went on to study mechanical engineering and energy systems engineering at Northeastern, and am currently working as a pipeline safety engineer for the Commonwealth, focused on gas safety since the Merrimack incident. A few years ago, I married my high school sweetheart, and we decided that Whitman was the place we wanted to start our family. I joined the finance committee around that time, about 2 years ago, and ever since I've been deeply involved in Whitman as we enter another period of transition. The state has changed the way that they fund education and changed how they incentivize development. I'm thinking about the future of Whitman, in part because I have 29 years left in my mortgage, but mostly because I want to raise my future children here. We have so much to offer in town. We're about 15 minutes away from both Massasoit and Bridgewater State. We're 35 minutes from South Station on the train. We have a loving, caring community. We have one of the nicest town centers on the South Shore and what I would call the nicest park on the South Shore. I'm tired of hearing we're too far from the highway as an excuse not to take chances to develop for the future. I don't like hearing that we don't have enough revenue to justify a long-term financial plan. I'm sick of excuses not to adapt. We need to embrace what we have to offer and develop a future of Whitman around that. On social media, I've proposed a few ideas, small but simple things within the power of a Whitman Selectman that I would like to see us pursue. That's why I'm running, because I believe in the future of Whitman. Thank you.
It's Justin Evans. Okay. First question up is from Tracy, the editor of the Whitman Hanson Express, and you have 1 minute to answer the question. Tracy, go ahead.
Before I get into the weeds on finances, I'm interested in knowing we're divided both locally and nationally by any metric one could name, politically, socially, culturally. How can we work together here in Whitman to help heal these rifts?
Who's that?
All right, so Justin, you have 1 minute.
That's a really good question. I think that Whitman has all the pieces that we need to help try and close that gap. But I think that one of the things that really drives it further is the way people act on social media. I grew up in an age where I've had a Facebook since I was about 16. I had a MySpace when I was like 13. I've grown up on social media, and there's a different way that people act on social media versus when you talk to them in person. I think that, really, we need to focus on just how to treat people in person and online, and I think that Whitman would be a good place to start. Get to know your neighbors and don't belittle people you don't see on Facebook.
Thank you, Justin.
Thanks.
Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute to answer the same question.
I agree in part with what Justin's saying. I think there's a great deal of strength that comes from anonymity or the ability to speak from behind a screen. There are things that people will gladly say from the comfort of their own living rooms, typing on a screen, that they would never say if they were standing with you, if they could actually have a one-on-one conversation with you, if they could actually talk to you. One of the biggest problems that we have is we hear, but we don't listen. I think if we were able to sit with each other and listen to each other a little bit more, we might realize that we all want to get to the same destination. Different paths don't mean that the destination is wrong. I think if we can agree on the things that are good about this community, the things that are good about things beyond the community, we're all going to be better off in the long run.
Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute to answer the same question.
Well, this is a situation that's coming from Washington, and it's trickling its way down to local communities like Whitman. People just don't like getting along anymore, and we need to put our partisan and religious and social issues aside and come together for common sense solutions for the citizens of the community in which you're working for. All that is just distractions. It just gets in the way and causes animosity amongst everyone. We just need to work on the issues that are at hand, and if you don't agree, it doesn't mean you hate the person. You can agree to disagree and try to come to common sense solutions that are better for everybody. In the long run, we all win.
So I would follow that up with, should there be a bylaw that limits town officials' use of social media, whether they are elected or appointed? Oh, I'm sorry. So go ahead. I apologize. You have 1 minute.
My crutches are an invisibility shield for you.
Well, I do agree that, yeah, we need to open up dialogue and we need to talk amongst each other. There's always going to be extremists on either side. There's going to be a far right and a far left, and there's nothing that we can do about that. But I think that we'll find out that the majority of us have more in common than we don't. And obviously, what's best for the town lies somewhere in the middle, and that's where we all have to come to terms. But until we're at the table, until we're talking, and until we work these things out, And we can't do it on social media. It's plain and simple. It has to be done. And obviously, it starts at this table on Tuesday nights.
Oddly enough, you get the first question. So the question that I was asking is, should there be a bylaw limiting town officials, whether they're elected or appointed, in regards to the use of social media?
No, there shouldn't be a bylaw, but there should be a policy, and there should be, and one thing that I've tried to bring, and I will continue to try, hopefully the town will allow me to do so, but we do need policies, and policies are what govern the way the town officials and board members behave. And there should be something out there for that. And it doesn't have to be an outright ban, but some guidelines on what to follow and rules of civility, and people shouldn't feel threatened, and you shouldn't be allowed to put something out there that is going to make someone else feel threatened or ridiculed.
Thank you, Mr. Lambiase. Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Sure. I don't believe that we should have a bylaw. We can consider a policy, but this is the only contested race this year. I don't think we need to put up any barriers to getting more people involved in local politics. We've got a bunch of committees that still have vacancies. Obviously, one contested race. We have trouble getting a quorum at town meeting. I don't think that we need to be, policing the way our volunteers, what they do in their free time.
Okay. Chris DiOrio, you have 1 minute. Same question.
I think social media is a tremendous tool. It's when it becomes a weapon that it's a problem. I don't think there should be any bylaws that restrict how you speak. And perhaps a policy would be the appropriate thing to do, but ultimately, you answer to the people that are out there. If you're going to make statements in social media, people are going to, respond, as long as it's coming from you. What happens is, again, we talk about this question of anonymity or hiding behind other people, or if it's coming from me, I stand by it. If it's coming from anybody here at this table, they should say it and then stand by it. It's that, I'm going to, hide and put it behind somebody else. That's a problem. I don't think we should be restricting speech at all. But you have to suffer the consequences for what you say.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Brian Bezanson, same question. You have 1 minute.
Well, I call social media anti-social media because I think it's been a huge detriment to society in general. I think it makes people mean, and I think it just creates animosity everywhere. The internet is okay, I think, but social media has been a real problem. And just look at this few that we have here in town. Constant arguments, fights. It's just, I find myself not being on it hardly at all. I think it's a disgrace half the time. But I think a bylaw is not the way to go. It is free speech. People have the right to be stupid. And that's half the time, that's what they do. And you have to suffer the consequences at the ballot box. And we should have a code of conduct, as you suggest. I think that it would be good to have a code of conduct as a town policy, a handbook situation. And, people sometimes abuse the social media, and sometimes they can get good word out. So I think it's a tough spot to be in, but we shouldn't regulate it with a bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Bezanson. Gentleman, Tracy has your next question.
Has the town really failed in its efforts to close its budget problem, or do you think it comes down to the state's failure to adequately fund new programs they require? How can town officials buck that trend on the state level?
Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute.
Well, I absolutely do think that it's the legislature that's the root of this problem. They're not fulfilling their obligations that they've set forth over the years of what they would pay for, how they would pay it, and when they would pay it. They're not doing that. And they won't do that as long as the situation up there is the way it is. So you can not count on them to do that. So what you have to do is, at this level, we have to find a way to increase revenues, cut costs, while maintaining services. Now, some say that you need a magic wand for that. I think it's just good old-fashioned hard work. Mr. Small and myself have been working many hours the past couple of weeks trying to find any nook and cranny that we can to help this situation. We have not found it. And it comes down to just working hard, trying to cut costs, increase revenue wherever you can, and just try to squeeze that gap.
Thank you, Mr. Bezanson. Scott Lambiase, you have 1 minute. Same question.
Yeah, I think that there's a little bit of responsibility on the boards, for sure, and obviously unfunded mandates coming down from the state, and budget shortfalls don't help. It is on us to follow up with our representatives and try and get them to help out at the state level, but on as far as the boards are concerned and what we should be doing, as Brian says, we should be looking for other ways to find revenue without it also being a tax. So that's the difficult part of it. In Duxbury, I've done a lot of things as far as, like I said, we do some land leases. I have cell tower deals. I've put solar power on most of the buildings out there. And things like that will help offset costs and decrease expenses. And some of them bring in revenue.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Lambiase. Justin Evans, same question. You have 1 minute.
Sure. So I think, like most of us, I'm going to say that the blame falls on both parties. The state, incentivized us to regionalize the school district in the early 90s, and there was a huge financial incentive for us to do that. In 2010, they changed the rules, and we haven't responded in kind to the dwindling state money coming our way. Now, there's still the unfunded mandates from the state that we have to deal with, and ultimately, I think that will have to be the solution. But the town, last year chose to pull money out of savings rather than fix the problem, and this year we're looking at laying off some school employees instead of trying to find new revenue. We're digging in every hole to cut expenses, but the town is going to have to figure out a new way to fund this.
Very good. Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
I apologize for repeating it, but I do think that both the local and state have their hands in this. The school department will tell you, and the numbers bear it out, that there's $8 million in mandates, and the state only funds 3 of them. We come in behind automatically with these underfunded and unfunded mandates for the school department, and that's just one department. But we can't continue as a town and as a local board to leave money on the table. We're not necessarily doing all that we can to maintain the tax base that we need to do, and we're not doing as much as we can to bring revenue in. We need to be a friendlier town for local business. We need to do that so we can have more, increase our infrastructure and have more money coming in, both from real estate, residential, and from commercial tax sources.
Very good. Gentlemen, do you favor an operational override or an override for the schools alone to help close the educational funding gap? Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute.
I think it's imprudent to turn up your nose at any possible solution to the problem. To have a knee-jerk reaction when you hear the word override and say absolutely not is not what we should be doing as a community. I do believe that we need to investigate what to do with an operational override. I do think it's a prudent course of action down the road. Frankly, I think it's something that we should have, been looking for in this in this particular period of time. We had 12 months to do this. The town administrator stood on the floor of the town meeting last year in May and said, next year we will need an override. That's 12 months. And now we're looking at maybe putting it on the ballot in November at a special election. We've had more than enough time to get it done. I think it should be now.
Very good. Mr. Bezanson, same question. You have 1 minute.
I actually am not in favor of an override in this election in May, and it's because the plan that we have in place now, while to some it might seem like a kick in the can down the road or a few houses or whatever the term is nowadays, we have a plan in place now that can get us with a debt exclusion to a place that's as painless as possible for the situation, with a set of plans for the fall, comprehensive set of plans where we'll be in a far better place to pass this in the fall and make the town a better place overall. It's, in the short term, it's going to be painful, but in the long term, it could help us get out of a situation and move on where we can have some sustainability for the next 5 years.
Very good. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute, the same question, sir.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to an override at all. It's just, we're not ready for it. We're definitely not ready for prime time on that. In order to do it, we need to do a long-term analysis. We need to adopt a lot of policies. We need to be able to say that if we're going to do this, we don't have to do this again in 2 years. We don't have to do this again in 3 years. So we can look and project our revenue, project our expenses, and really, other than the unfunded mandates, we should be able to see what we're going to need now to get us much further down the road. So, yeah, I think, Proposition 2.5, the reason why there's an ability to do the override within that is because it's something that at some point in time you may have to do it. And it's a big deal. We want to bring it to the voters, but we're not ready to bring it to the voters until we're ready to say, yeah, we've looked at this, we've done an analysis, and this is going to get us through the next 5 or 10 years.
Very good. Justin Evans, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Sure. So the short answer is yes, we've pushed an operational override off until the fall, and I think we're going to need to, I'd be in favor of putting that before the voters to see if they would support it. On the Finance Committee for the last 2 years, we've really been talking about developing a sustainable budget, something that we're not going to have to come back to the voters year after year and, pull out a capital stabilization or request an override. Had we, we're going to put a debt exclusion on the ballot this year, this would be the third time in 4 years, I think, that we've put some question for either override or debt exclusion before the voters. We can't continue doing that over and over. We need to get all our ducks in a row and fix the problem once.
Very good. Gentlemen, your next question is going to come from Tracy Seelye.
Since you're talking about waiting till the fall, how would you convince voters that any override is necessary and desirable to solve the town's economic crisis?
Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute.
Sure. I think we have to do our homework. We need to show what an override would fund. I think, the people serving on the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee know the situation that our budget is in, but we haven't broken through to the rest of the town yet. We need to develop a good system to present this information out. I know the town administrator had a informational session last week that began that process. We need to continue showing the voters what it is that we need to fund and why we can't do it within the confines of Proposition 2.5 right now.
Thank you. Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
I agree. I think that one of the biggest hurdles that we'll have to get over when it comes to an override is educating the folks that are going to be making that decision. Ultimately, it's the town that's going to decide this. But we can't have a situation where folks are walking in being asked what to do about an override without having all the information in front of them. Not just what this is going to do in terms of the town for long-term sustainability, but I think part of that education also has to be letting them know that here in this community, we are surrounded by other communities that are having their own problems, but they are still taxed at a higher rate than we are. I think that they have to understand that when we get across that 2.5 threshold, that what we need to do is let them see that we are well below where we could be. And we need to get to a level where we're going to have some degree of sustainability, not just this year, but long-term, a 5 or 10-year plan. And that comes with educating them about how it's going to work and how it's going to be applied.
Thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Well, I think education is clearly the key. When we had our survey done by Dr. Tocci and Bridgewater University, the question was, one of the questions was about Proposition 2.5 and debt exclusions. Now, the way I took it, the way Dr. Tocci explained it to me, was that the results showed that the town has an appetite for a debt exclusion, as long as it describes specifically what the money is going to go to. Now, if you take the debt exclusion part out of that survey numbers, the rest of those numbers say 2 to 1, the town doesn't have an appetite for overrides. And I don't think it's anybody on the Board of Selectmen to push one way or the other. It's merely to educate the folks and let them make their own minds up. It's their money. They should decide whether they want an override or not, and we should make sure that we give them enough information, specific information as to where this money is
Time's up,
going to
sir.
go.
Mr. Lambiase, same question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we do have to educate folks and let them know where the money's going, but we also have to show them and give them a level of confidence that we know what we're doing. We have to adopt policies and we have to adhere to them, and they have to be sound fiscal, financial policies. And if we're not doing that and we're not showing them that, we're running this like the, $50 million company that it is, then they're not going to buy into any of it. We can tell them all we want that, if you want nice roads and you want to have good public safety and you want to have great schools, you're going to have to pay more. Well, that's not enough. The education part's fine, but to show them that we know what we're doing and that we're willing to handle their money properly, that's the biggest part.
Each of you currently serve on a board or a committee. Mr. Bezanson and Mr. Lambiase serve on the Board of Selectmen, and Mr. DiOrio and Mr. Evans serve on the town's Finance Committee. I'm asking you to describe a difficult vote you have taken while serving as a member of said board. It doesn't matter if it's an action that happened recently or a year or two ago. What was the purpose or ramification of the vote, and how did you vote? What was the final vote, and why did you vote the way you did? You have 1 minute. Mr. Lambiase, you go first.
Yeah, I don't remember. A lot of the votes are difficult votes, and anytime, especially when it comes down to the budget. There's certain things that we don't always agree on. I think certainly recently we had a gentleman who came in and asked about coming in front of town meeting for liquor license. And we only have so many in our quota. The state sets the quota, and there's an ability to go and petition town meeting if you want more. And I think some of the members of the board felt as though, it should be up to town meeting. Myself thought it shouldn't be. I think that, we're as elected officials, we should have the ability to make those decisions. And if there's a quota, it's there for a reason. And, and until the state changes it, I don't see the need to go to town meeting. Was it the best thing for that person? Maybe not, but I thought it was the best thing for the town.
Okay. Justin Evans, you have 1 minute as well. Same question. If you need me to repeat it, feel free to ask.
Sure. So I was trying to think of that while Scott was talking.
Mm-hmm.
Last year, the Finance Committee, in the final weeks leading up to town meeting, was trying to present a balanced budget and vote on our recommendations. And what we finally presented was a measure to pull $800,000 out of the capital stabilization account in order to balance the budget and fund all the departments at level service or as close to level service as we could get. I did eventually vote in favor of that, but I mean, we grappled back and forth because there's not another pot of money to pull out of this year. We knew that 2020 was going to be hurt by doing that in 2019. It was a difficult vote, but I still believe I did the right thing.
Okay. Mr. DiOrio, same question, sir.
It's the same vote. It's, when you're taking from those kinds of accounts that really you shouldn't be drawing down on to balance your budget, having to come to that decision was extremely difficult. The folks around the table went at it for quite a while. Ultimately, we had to do it, but nobody wants to feel like they're making a decision with a gun to their head. And that's kind of what happened in that city. It was either this or, going back to the table, extending town meeting, coming back in and trying to cut away from the budget, losing jobs, losing people. That's not what we want to do. That's what makes these decisions hard. It's what makes the decisions hard this year. The notion that if we don't take a certain path, that people wind up losing their jobs or wind up getting pink slips or something of that nature. It's why long-term planning is important, so we don't find ourselves in these gun-to-the-head situations in making decisions that affect people's lives long-term.
Very good. Mr. Bezanson, you also have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Well, I would say probably the same as those gentlemen over there said it was last year. And the discussion was very painful. And I made the motion for the town to go to 9.5 for the schools last year. And I knew that was going to be a painful decision. I didn't know how the board was going to vote on it. But I thought at the time that that was the right move, because as painful as it was going to be, it was the right thing to do. The schools needed the money. I know that it was going to affect us this year. But I thought in the year's time that we would be able to come to some kind of solution. It's been tough. So I would connect these 2 years together. That vote, which did pass at 9.5% for the schools last year, and the vote that we took for 6.5 this year with the department head's budget. Those were the two hardest and most painful, and the ones that kept me up at night the most, and I still think it's the right thing to do.
Gentlemen, your next question will come from Tracy. Tracy?
Aside from the budget, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing Whitman, and what possible solutions do you offer?
Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute to answer the question.
Repeat that, please.
Aside from the budget, what do you believe is the most pressing issue facing Whitman, and what possible solutions do you offer?
Well, I think we have, as the survey suggested by the people that returned it, our roads are in tough shape. We need some plans to get more Chapter 90 money or grants or something, because these winters are taking their toll on our roads. And you can look on anti-social media, and they're all complaining about the roads, even after this winter we had that was mild. So I would say it's one of the pressing issues. We need to have a sustained plan more than we have now. And I know the DPW does a great job, and they do the best they can with the money that they are allotted. But as we get out of this crisis, we need to have some plan in place where we can still add monies to the Chapter 90 fund to get these roads back in shape.
Thank you. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute, sir. Same question.
Yeah, if we do, when we do get through the budget, and, we still, this year's budget's not going to put a lot into capital, so we're going to have to look at our assets, and we're going to have a long-term capital plan. One of the biggest ones that is staring us right in the face is a DPW facility that is well beyond its usable lifespan. And and I faced this at my daytime job quite a bit over the years. I've had to build a police station, I've had to build a fire station, I've had to build a crematory. And we're also trying to build a DPW facility over there. They're very expensive and they're very big, and it's a lot to ask for the voters. It's going to be even more hard to ask the voters for this as we're going through potential overrides, budget crises, and yet to adopt any long-term plans. But it's going to have to be done, and we're going to have to face it.
Very good. Mr. Evans, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
Sure. Those were two very important issues that I've heard out on the campaign trail, but I would say that the most pressing issue is still the opioid crisis in Whitman. You can't walk down around town without seeing needles still on the side of the road. I've talked to people, grandparents who are raising their kids. This problem is finally getting better, but it's still affecting a lot of people in Whitman. And we need to continue funding Whitman Will and Whitman Counseling the way that Whitman has. We've given a couple $1,000s to each of those groups last year, and Whitman Counseling we've been doing for a while. I think that is probably the best method to continue doing. And with the budget crisis we're facing, it's hard to keep funding those programs, but we need to.
Okay. Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute, sir.
Education, schools. I think right now, there is a direct correlation between diminishment in educational opportunities and diminishment in educational access and poverty and crime. And if you want to talk about the opioid crisis, what's going to happen when we have kids that are undereducated, that can't compete out there in the world for jobs in the 21st century? You have problems where people go down a bad road because they aren't able to compete educationally. We have to do better at keeping our kids here, not losing them to charter schools, not losing them to other educational opportunities because we can't do for them what they need done here. It shouldn't fall on the backs of parents and PTAs and PTOs to put technology in each of our schools. It shouldn't happen. We have to do better at helping our kids compete long term. We spend $15,000 a year per pupil in Massachusetts on students. We spend $58,000 on keeping people in prison. The cost of not educating them is worse.
Thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Whitman currently has one tax rate for both residents and businesses that they pay. Knowing that the town has struggled over the past couple of years to generate revenue, how do you feel individually about a split tax rate? Would you vote for such a proposal? Mr. DiOrio, you are first. 1 minute.
I would. I think it's definitely something that we need to investigate, but before you go down that road, you have to have actual numbers in front of you to see what it's going to be, what it's going to turn into. Communities that have tried to do that, to go from a single system to a bifurcated system, find that they might lose businesses and turn businesses away. You know, I made mention of the fact that we need to be friendlier to businesses coming in. Perhaps having some sort of a two-tiered rate to do that might help. But until you have the actual numbers in front of you, you don't know if it's going to help or hurt. It definitely deserves investigation because, you know, if we want to bring business in, we're going to have to address the problem.
Very good. Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
I'm not in favor of a two-tiered system because we don't have enough percentage-wise. We're about 3%. You need to be in the 15 to 20% to make it worth. And then again, you still might drive away business or have businesses leave that are already here in existence. I've been working with Assistant Town Administrator Lisa Green on a plan that's a tax incentive plan that would, over a graduated time, 5 to 10 years, which would try to entice businesses, existing businesses and new businesses to come to Whitman, to get us more into the upper percentages. And I think that that's the long-term solution, is to try to entice businesses to get here through tax incentive plans. And you know, you can still see that there is some retail spaces around, but we need some bigger businesses that will give us some employment opportunities as well. So you need those kind of companies, the small business, which drives the force in the country.
Okay. Mr. Lambiase, same question. You have 1 minute, sir.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the last 7 years I've been on the board, the assessors come in once a year and they set the tax rate with us and they do an analysis and they show us what the gain would be to have a slightly higher tax rate for business. And it's not very much. It's not a large percentage of the town, and the ones that are here are struggling as it is. As you can see, there are plenty of closed shops. So yeah, you know, I'm not in favor of it. And as Brian said, you know, and Chris too, and everybody here, we'd love to bring business to town. And the best way to do that is to offer tax incentives, which means not charging them more money, but giving them an incentive to come here, and the offset of it being, you know, jobs, investment in the community, and hopefully better services and better, you know, services for the community.
Okay. Mr. Evans, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
So no, I'm not in favor of splitting the tax system. I have asked about this in the past, and the answer I got from the assessors was that you would need to raise the tax on commercial business by about $10 for every 1,000 of value to reduce $1 for residential taxes per 1,000. It's just not, there's not enough commercial space in town to make a difference for the taxpayers.
Very good. Gentlemen, your next question is coming from Tracy Seelye.
In view of Whitman's current financial situation, if you have in the past, do you still, or do you, newcomers, support a new DPW building?
Is that me?
Yes, Justin, you have, no, actually, It is you, for 1 minute.
Okay. Yes, I do support a new DPW building. Right around the time I announced that I was going to run for selectman, I took a tour of the building that we have, and it's in rough shape. There's like one room that has air conditioning, and it's duct taped back together. I believe we've looked at this several times in the last 10 or 20 years and just keep putting it off. And that's been a trend with everything within the DPW. You know, their trucks get put off of warrant articles. You know, we want to complain about the roads, but if we don't give the DPW what they need to do their job, if we can't provide them a safe place to work, and with the new OSHA standards coming into municipal buildings, that's going to be another risk that Whitman faces. I think it's time for us to really put a plan together for a new DPW.
Very good, thank you. Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute.
I agree. I am in favor of it, moving forward on a new DPW building. And I had the chance to talk with a couple of folks who work at the DPW just this past weekend. And in talking about it, they said they really don't need a tremendously extravagant new structure. It can be done not as expensive as some of the other large, projects that we've had in town. To go down and to see the trucks that they've welded, new metal plates into the floorboards of the trucks because their feet were falling through. It's disturbing. And then we have these issues with roads and with infrastructure, and they don't have the tools to do the work and a place to put the tools. I think we definitely have to do better for them.
Very good, thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Mr. Bezanson, same question, 1 minute.
I do and have for a long time supported this effort. I was in the initial discussions with Mr. Salvucci was there when we wanted to do these buildings before. And for one reason or another, they were shot down. No money, no voter support. And for a long, long time, the DPW has been set aside, put to the back burner. And at some point, we have to address this, and it should be sooner than later, because the OSHA compliance, we will fail miserably. And we need to make it a safe place for our employees, place where they can get their job done right. And it's really been a shame that for all this time that we haven't been able to come to some solution to get that building done. But we should do better, and we should really make that first and foremost focus of our new capital plan.
Okay, very good. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Yes, I agree. We definitely need a new facility. I think we do have to look at it because these facilities come with a big price tag. We just had one in Duxbury that got denied at town meeting. It was, an $18 million price tag. I don't remember what the price tag on this one was. Maybe half that, a little bit more, but it's a lot of money. Unfortunately, we also have a lot of equipment that's, that we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on, and the inventory is huge, and it's not properly stored. It can't be. We have people who are not working under the best conditions. So all of that is a very big liability. It's not fair to the people, and it's a liability because our equipment's not going to hold up. So it makes sense. We have to do it. It's just that we have to sort of relook at what needs to be done and what we can afford and how we can do it.
This is worthy of bringing up the debt exclusion versus the override, or debt exclusion and override. We talk about a capital project like the DPW building. If debt exclusion is passed, that frees up money for capital expenses. Make your argument for either or a debt exclusion and override, or for both. Mr. Lambiase, if we start with you first.
Well, obviously, anytime you're doing a capital project, especially, that kind of money, we want to do it as a debt exclusion, and, eventually you pay it off and it comes down off of your tax rolls or of your payments. The override is something totally different. It's something, if we're doing an operational override, it's because we finally done an analysis. We know what we need to sustain our budget, sustain the school budget, to fund all of our programs and to fund our future capital programs. So there's a bit of a difference, and I think in the right context, either one is necessary. Certainly, the debt exclusion is necessary if we want to do large capital projects, and I think eventually the override would be necessary if we want to have a sustainable budget for the community.
Very good. All right, Mr. Evans, same question, sir. Make your argument for either a debt exclusion, an override, or both.
Sure. So I've spoken a little bit about an override already tonight. I think that for long-term planning, we're going to need to prove that we can pay to sustain the budget long-term because there aren't a lot more places for us to cut. And that's something that we're looking at in the fall. Around the debt exclusion, since I'm a member of the Finance Committee, I'm technically a town employee, so I can't advocate for anything that is going to be on the ballot in May. But I can kind of dance around and say that last week the Finance Committee unanimously voted to adopt the budget that includes the debt exclusion. And for all the reasons that Scott just said about why debt exclusions help with large capital projects, I'll just kind of leave that there.
Do you have a date for the dance?
No, not yet.
Mr. DiOrio, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
Again, I have to defer on commenting specifically on the debt exclusion. As a member of the Finance Committee, I would say that it would have made more sense to do the override first, in my opinion, and to set the debt exclusion aside for later. But in terms of the override itself, it has to be part of a long-term financial plan. We have to have, we have an analysis that I believe we're scheduled to get sometime at the end of April regarding some long-term stability and some long-term capital planning, a 5-year plan, hopefully at least. And once we have that in place, then we can start talking about what the override can do. Again, we don't have enough information at this point now, but I think that there are reasons why that should have been addressed 12 months ago and for the past year.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Bezanson, same question. You have 1 minute, sir.
Well, back when we did the $10 million project with the police station, new police station, renovations to this building and the fire station, within the levy limit, $10 million. It was right for the time, and people's taxes didn't go up. It was the right plan for the right time. But things change. Now is time to get that money freed up for other things, and the debt exclusion is the perfect time to do this. Free up that money so we can do more capital projects. And I think, based on that survey, that the folks will be more amenable to this debt exclusion right away, freeing up space rather than a 2.5 override. So I'm not against a 2.5 override at some point, because you have to get more revenue. We just can't live in limbo forever.
Gentlemen, your next question is coming from Tracy Seelye with the Whitman Hanson Express. Tracy?
It's been mentioned a couple times so far this evening. How valuable do you think the recent community assessment survey has been engaging the public's wishes about town priorities?
Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute.
I love it. I think that it was a fantastic idea. I thought, at no cost to the community, while it was only about 1,100 or so people that responded to it, Dr. Tocci said that was a good sample and a good snapshot of the community. And I think it gave us some really good information. The top 3 things that the voters had on their mind was the schools. Second was their property taxes. And third were the roads. All things we discussed here tonight. So I think people have determined that they want the services to remain. They just don't want to pay for it. So that we're in a catch-22 scenario now. We have to educate everyone so they can make their best decision. It's their money. And that survey really, really helped give us an idea on where they want to go.
Mr. Lambiase, you have 2 minutes. You have 1 minute, sorry. Same question.
It's a very useful tool. It was nice, and it's great that it was at no cost to the community. It does give us a good idea. 1,100 people is a pretty good sample set, I would say. And it gives us an idea of what the general citizen wants to see the town be like. And you know, whether it translates into what we're going to do in the future or not it's going to be the difficult part that we're going to have to put in front of the communities to sort of prioritize. But it certainly is a good starting place. You know, without a committee to do a sort of a comprehensive plan and a master plan of the town, which we don't have a planner to do stuff like that, this was very helpful.
Very good. Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Sure. So I'm an engineer. I'm a bit of a math guy, and I can say that 1,100 respondents in a town with 10,000 registered voters is a really good sample size. I think it told us a lot of information about, you know, what people in town would be willing to support an override for. That question was in there, and it came out that, you know, we want to support the schools, police, and fire, and then to a lesser degree DPW and library. The largest departments in the town and the ones that seem to need the most funding most of the time. So now it's a matter for the people, whoever gets elected from this table, along with the serving members of the Board of Selectmen, to put together a plan with those priorities in mind and look at how we fund those kind of things in the future.
Chris DiOrio, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
I think it was a great idea at its inception. I think the execution was done relatively well. I think the sample size, as everybody here has said, was certainly a wonderful sample size to have. But like any tool, it depends on how you use it. And if we are not willing to use the information in it, then it was basically just a nice shiny saw that we put up on the pegs and never use. Looking at those numbers very specifically, as was mentioned here, 61% of the people surveyed were in favor of an override. 68% of those people in favor of an override were in favor of an override for schools, 48% for police and fire and public safety. We have to take the information from this and use that, recognizing that these 1,100 people that took the time to take this survey are likely the same people that are going to show up at a ballot box and do something about it, and are the same people that will come to a town meeting and have a vote.
Very good. All right, next question. This is in regards to you. We got 2 openings on the ballot come May 18th. 2 of you are incumbents, 2 of you are seeking to be on the board. So I basically want to know, I think the voters want to know, what do you bring? What do you bring as an individual? Or if you are an incumbent, what have you brought? Describe that, and maybe you say, you can, during your 1 minute, talk about what you bring or what you feel the board is lacking and needs. We will start with Mr. DiOrio. You have 1 minute, sir.
My profession, you know, as I said, I'm a trial attorney. I ask questions for a living and I go looking for answers. But you also have to be able to sit down with a person. The type of law that I practice has me dealing with individuals on a daily basis. I'm not, you know, working for large corporations. I have people one-on-one in front of me who have problems. I catch them at their most emotional points in their lives. And I have to sit with them and guide them through a very difficult process through our court systems. That's what I do. So I think that those skills taken into this context, working for the community, allowing me to sit down and address problems and solving issues for people is the greatest gift that I can give to this board.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Brian Bezanson, you have 1 minute. Same question.
Well, being on the board for 15 years, growing up in this community, going through the schools in this town, I've known a lot of people. I hear a lot of life stories from these folks. I've gone through a lot with them. And I bring compassion, understanding for this community, knowing what we've gone through, knowing where we want to be. It's not an easy road. I've cried with these people. I've laughed with these people. I know this community very, very well. And I just want to continue to help everybody, serve this community because I'm part of this community. I live here. These decisions we make here affect me and my family, my friends, and people that are not my friends yet. Those are important values to have. You need to know the community.
Thank you, Mr. Bezanson. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Well, mostly what I can bring is what I do for a living. I work for a municipality, responsible for getting projects done, like DPW facilities, getting buildings built, working with committees, resolving issues within the town. My department, amongst other things, is a complaint department. We deal with people every day, and we try to resolve issues. We get things funded, we get the budget put together. Mostly, what I would like to bring to the committee, to the board, would be to continue getting these financial policies adopted, to continue getting a financial roadmap to success for the future, to get, the roads fixed, to get the schools funded, to keep public safety funded properly. Those are things that I want to see done.
Thank you, Mr. Lambiase. Mr. Evans? Same question, 1 minute, sir.
Sure. So I think that I bring a different perspective. So I can talk about, my engineering background, my technical skills. I can talk about how I was raised by a paramedic and a nurse, growing up in a family of first responders. But the symbolism of me sitting up here with three people, 20 to 30 years my senior, is really not lost on me. I come from a generation of people who we're trying to draw to town. What is it that will bring more millennials further down the commuter rail as we're getting priced out of South Boston or Cambridge or Somerville, and what will bring more young people to Whitman? I think it's important for us to start looking at what Whitman's going to look like in 10 or 15 or 30 years, and having a different perspective on the Board of Selectmen really helps that.
Gentlemen, your next question will come from Tracy Seelye. Tracy?
Has anything in town been falling through the cracks while so much attention has been demanded of the budget issue?
Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute.
Sure. So capital projects, the short answer for that, we've talked a lot tonight about how we've put off funding a new DPW, any of the trucks, the maintenance, all the upkeep for things that we've not been able to fund because we don't have either a long-term capital plan, although now we are working on one with the Collins Center, I expect to see soon. That kind of thing is easiest to cut when it comes to the budget, and if you look at the budget presentation we'll be putting before town meeting this year, the last thing to get funded will be all the capital projects, and if a debt exclusion does not pass, that's what's not going to get funded.
Very good. Mr. DiOrio, same question, sir, 1 minute.
There are two entities in town that don't get enough attention, and it continues to fall behind in this budget cycle, and that's our library and our Council on Aging. The two fastest growing demographics in this town, the two largest groups in this community, are children under the age of 15 and people over the age of 65. And if we continue to let the library, linger at the fringes and not address the needs of the Council on Aging, and takes, they're cutting hours, they're cutting programs, and granted, they're not getting help from the federal or state government as well. But these groups are the largest groups that need our services, including from fire and police. So we have to do better with these entities to serve the lesser parts of our community, the younger parts of our community, and the library specifically dealing with some of the poorer parts of our community. That might be the only internet service they get, is through our library. And if we continue to cut them down, that we're going to lose out on these kids having access to something vital to their education.
Thank you, Mr. DiOrio. Mr. Bezanson, same question, sir, 1 minute.
Well, I would say it all stems to revenue streams. We have to come up with ways to generate out-of-the-box revenue streams so we can fund all this. Our senior population, if we're not careful, taxing them out of the town. If we continue to spend irresponsibly on projects without having revenue streams to back them up, these folks are going to be in reverse mortgage situations, or they're going to have to sell and move out of town. And these are the people who built this town. They deserve better. We need to protect the seniors through responsible spending and creating revenue going forward. They need to stay here as long as they can. So the seniors need some protection.
Thank you, Mr. Bezanson. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Yeah, there's a, with the upcoming budget, there's a lot of things that we're probably not going to get done that we'd love to get done, and things that we probably should have been working on if we had a clear and smooth budget year. But absolutely, our senior center, our library, we have a great rec program, and we'd hate to see anything happen to that rec program. It's taken a long time to get it to where it is now, but it's great that the kids can enjoy it, and we offer a lot of different things for them. Personally, within the board, things that I think that haven't gotten done that I hope that once we get beyond the budget that we start getting done is getting back into, our financial policies and getting into our personnel plan and our benchmarking and, where we're going to go in the future and how we're going to deal with it. It's important work, and, it's time to get back onto it.
Gentlemen, we have a unique situation here where the four of you have been part of what's been going on for the past 4 months in regards to the budget cycle, looking at the budgets. You've held joint meetings, you've been together, give your snapshot of what you've had to go through and how you've dealt with some of the decisions you've made, some of the arguments that you've made during some of these meetings. For folks who may not be able to see it, because we know that you don't necessarily get to see every finance committee meeting, and maybe not everybody gets to see a selectmen's meeting. If you will, kind of give your thought on what's going on and where we are at this particular time in the town's financial situation. I will start with Mr. Scott Lambiase. You have 1 minute, sir.
Well, it was a very difficult year, as everybody knows. Unfortunately, I have been absent for the last few weeks due to my surgery, but I've been able to watch on TV. It's been kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. There's been a lot of disagreement. I think there's been a lot of misinformation out there. There's been maybe a lot of panicking when we should be staying the course. It is a tough budget year. I don't like the idea of using, like we did last year, I don't like the idea of using free cash. I don't like the idea of taking from capital stabilization. There's a lot of things that I don't like to see being done to balance a budget. And all it did was kick a can down the road. And as much as I think it'd be great to get beyond this budget cycle, I have a feeling that we've done nothing but the same thing.
30-second follow-up. Anything you would have done differently during the past 4 months? 30 seconds.
Past 4 months?
5 months, 6 months, year?
Maybe past year, yes. I think absolutely. I think that this is something that is, other candidates have said, we've known about this for a year. Personally, I think I would have liked to have brought in somebody in, a consultant to come in, a financial consultant, to come in and look at it with us. I think sometimes we get skewed and we have our own view. And sometimes it's nice to have an outside view, and there's plenty of people that would have helped with that.
Very good. All right, Mr. Evans, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
Sure. So for anybody that wasn't as involved as the four gentlemen sitting up here, we did have a 1-year head start on this. We knew this was coming. We pulled out of savings last year to balance the budget. And then this year kind of came at it from all different directions. At one point there were 3 different budgets floating around. The Selectmen had one, the Finance Committee had one, and then the department heads put one together, which is now the one we're actively working with. So props to them. But I wish that we had gotten together and kind of planned how we would all attack this, because I know that the Finance Committee was coming at it from a worst case scenario. We don't spend any money, we don't get an override, we don't pass a debt exclusion, and we save money for capital. And that is not the scenario we're working with right now. So I wish that we had, I wish the Finance Committee had really taken the lead on that and put something together to kind of coordinate all of these budgets floating around.
30-second follow-up. Anything you would have done differently, during your time sitting on the board, a part of the joint committee? You have 30 seconds.
Sure. I actually served on the budget subcommittee with both Brian and Scott. I wish that committee, in my role on that committee, I wish that we had taken a stronger role in developing, policies how to prevent this from happening again.
Very good. Mr. DiOrio, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
The I mean, our finance committee year began a lot earlier than it has in the past. This is going on my 4th year on the finance committee. And in previous years, we'd come in, end of December, maybe a little bit start in January. We started in October to get 2 rounds of department heads to come in with the understanding at the outset that our charge was to look at it from 2 scenarios. To look at it from a scenario of, do we have an override and a debt exclusion? What do we do? And then what do we do if we don't? We had to look at doomsday scenarios here for the better part of our time, having departments come in and give us their budgets with 6% cuts. And, ultimately, we probably should have done more in terms of communicating between the selectmen, the finance committee, and the boards to get a better result.
30-second follow-up. Anything that you wish you could have done, that you could change or do differently, whether it's for past 4 months, past year?
I think, again, it comes down to what we had from the department heads. And as they came in with us, we were operating under a certain scenario, a variety of different scenarios. Give us 3% cuts, give us 6% cuts, give us level service, give us level fund. And I think we would have been better served choosing a path and staying with it.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Bezanson, same question, sir. You have 1 minute.
I really think that we all knew last year that this was coming. And I think in defense of everybody, the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, and the department heads, and the schools, everybody worked hard on this. And I just don't know if the sense of urgency was quite there. But there isn't one person in any of these boards that didn't want this to work out. Everybody was working very hard at this. Should we have tried to be more expedient? Yes. There isn't one person in the government that is anti-education or anti-public safety, anti-library or anything else. Everybody wants this town to succeed. We just should have done it faster and harder.
30-second follow-up. Anything you wish you had done different, you did differently, any actions you're going to take in, whether it's the past 4 months, whether it's the past year, you specifically?
Yeah, I think I should have took a more active role in reaching out to these departments, because while we all have liaisons and everybody knows that, you need to get more active, I think, to help everybody out. Everybody says, well, we don't want to pit departments against each other. Well, that's exactly what happened. And it continues to happen. And we have to change that kind of culture. We're a town. Every department, schools, police, fire, everybody. We all have to work together.
Very good. Gentlemen, your final question before we go to lightning round will come from Tracy. Tracy, next question.
Brian just mentioned the problem of departments being pitted against each other. How do you make cuts to the town and the schools without that happening? Is there any way to prevent that?
Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute.
It's very difficult. And I'll tell you, in the 15 years that I've been here, it seems like every year it gets worse and worse and worse. And maybe that's the culture of the way government is these days. It's terrible. We should be all working together. Instead, it seems like we have pockets of people working for their own interests, and I understand that. But we should only have one interest at heart here, and that's the citizens and the taxpayers of this community. It's their town, it's their money. We all have to work together, whether we like it or not, whether we agree with anybody or not. We need to come together, and if it takes bigger meetings, longer meetings, more meetings, whatever it takes, we have to come to solutions quickly and together. And I think that's the only way it'll change.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Yeah, well, it boils down to leadership. I think ultimately at the end of the day, when the department heads got themselves together, they worked this out. And had we had some good leadership from us early on, I think we would have gotten together with them like that. And I think that would have avoided a lot of the department against department in the beginning. And it's just a traditional way of doing things, is that you bring a budget, you go through department by department. But when you bring them all together, and I think the schools obviously have to be involved in that, and one of my bigger regrets is probably that we didn't push that budget subcommittee more, and I do want to bring that back and work that out, because that was the idea of that, was to get us all together, that we're all working early on and working together. And as you can see, when everybody is working together, it does work out.
Very good, thank you. Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
Sure. So I think that a lot of the problem was just a lack of communication between the Finance Committee, the Board of Selectmen, the Town Administrator, the department heads, everybody involved in the process. The Finance Committee came at it with, present 3% and 6% cuts in the event that an override doesn't pass. The Board of Selectmen indicated they didn't think an override was likely to pass this year, and the department heads took that as an understanding that they'd be laying people off this year. And everybody got scared. Employees started reaching out, looking for jobs other places, and we really bungled the whole rollout. I wish that there had been more communication back and forth to stop, because it wasn't just pitting departments against each other, it was scaring people that they were going to lose their jobs. So I think if we're just more open about why we're looking for 3% and 6% cuts, and what might happen if an override doesn't pass, or if we didn't get a debt exclusion on the ballot, just be upfront and tell the people what we're doing.
Thank you. Mr. DiOrio, you have 1 minute. Same question, sir.
I think we should have and have to do better working, with each other, in terms of communicating, in terms of information, in terms of getting these departments to work together, recognizing that, because one department is the largest department doesn't mean that they are the one that's going to be attacked. They should have been involved from the beginning in all of these discussions. They have to be involved. It's not a town and gown situation. It's a town, and the schools are a huge part of this town. They have to have been involved from the beginning, and I think that's a great, I think that was a problem in a lot of what we had, our discussions throughout the committee and the Board of Selectmen, as well as all the departments, in terms of getting the information from them and expressing to them what it is that we were looking to do. But getting all people involved at once, I think, is the only way we're going to solve this problem going forward.
All right, time for the lightning round. You gentlemen, you all did a great job. Thank you very much, and thank you for our audience as well, who is here. Just a brief description of the lightning round. It's either a yes or no. Of course, whoever's asking the question will ask you what exactly they want. It could be multiple choice. It also could be an answer that requires 1 to 2 sentences. Why this exercise? Because folks who are running for office find it brutally hard to give, and because they want to explain why they said yes or why they said no. So it gives you an opportunity to dance, as Justin said earlier, but do it eloquently, okay? Tracy, you get the first lightning round question.
Would you support taking a second look at permitting retail recreational marijuana sales in town to generate revenue? Yes or no, in a couple sentences.
Mr. DiOrio, dance.
Absolutely. I think that, in the situation that we're in right now, we can't afford to be turning up our nose at anything. And to think that, because we're going to turn that money away, that these substances are not going to be brought into the town when 6 licenses are sitting in Brockton and other communities around us are voting on it as well, I think is extremely short-sighted.
Mr. Bezanson.
No, the people have spoken. And the chances of Whitman getting any retail licenses from this state are minimal, if nil.
Okay. Mr. Lambiase.
I would certainly, take a look at it. If it was to come up, I would have no problem putting it back in front of the voters. The voters did vote in favor of recreational marijuana. When it came time to negotiate and put something in town, even for medical, they weren't happy about it, or so. But I would always put it back in front of the voters.
Mr. Evans.
Yes, I don't think we're in a position to be turning any businesses away, especially after we see, some of the fears that residents in town may have had as this rolls out in other communities have not been found.
Okay. Staying with you, Mr. Evans. Next question. This is a for or against. Are you for or against Plymouth County government? This has been a discussion that's been ongoing for probably a decade, if not a little bit more, because of a lack of a charter. For or against?
I am for. I don't think Whitman needs to build its own courthouse.
For or against?
For.
Mr. DiOrio.
4.
Mr. Bezanson.
also.
Mr. Bezanson.
I'm for county government.
And again, Mr. Lambiase.
I'm for it.
Tracy.
How many Whitman Town meetings have you attended? Just a number, please.
Mr. Lambiase.
How many Whitman Town meetings have I attended? 20? 40?
Mr. Evans.
At least the last 3.
Mr. DiOrio.
I've been a resident of the town for 6 years now. I've been to 6 meetings.
And Mr. Bezanson.
All that I can remember, which is a long time.
We'll take that.
All right, this one is kind of an easy one, but not necessarily. Favorite place to eat in Whitman? Pick one. We would go with Mr. Bezanson.
Wow. I think the Thai restaurant downtown is pretty darn good.
Okay. Mr. Lambiase.
McWiggins.
Mr. DiOrio.
McWiggins.
Mr. Evans.
McGuigan's.
Okay, they get the vote. All right, time for us to do closing statements, gentlemen. And we reversed the order that we had from the opening statements. Mr. Evans, you have 1 minute to provide your closing statement.
Sure. So since I announced that I was running, I've knocked on over 2,000 doors in town. I've attended a dozen committee meetings besides the committees that I already serve on. I'm putting in the work required not just to get elected, but to successfully do the job once elected. I wanted to know what the Housing Authority or the Cultural Council or Friends of the Park needed from this office, so I went to go attend their meetings and ask. Most of engineering is about solving problems, so I'm running as a problem solver. I want to get to the root of some of these issues. I'm also running a modern campaign. You've probably seen me on several Whitman Facebook groups or seen me on Instagram or Twitter. I'm trying to be an accessible candidate, and I'll be an accessible selectman. If you want to get in touch with me, please visit votejustinevans.com or contact me across social media at votejustinevans. Thank you, and remember, vote Justin Evans for selectman on May 18th.
Thank you, Mr. Evans. Mr. Lambiase, you have 1 minute for your closing statement, sir.
I just want to, say that I'm honored to be here with such a great group of talented individuals. It says a lot about our community that, we're fortunate enough to have, this many talented people that are willing to volunteer their time to work for a better town, work to improve our lives. I want to thank the citizens of Whitman for allowing me the privilege of stewarding this wonderful town also. I have a lot more work that I'd like to do on the Board of Selectmen. If you want to see the town continue to adopt the best management practices of the Commonwealth, implement a plan for growth and stability, please remember me on Election Day. The time has come. We have to develop and implement the long-term plans. We need to repair and protect our infrastructure and assets. We have to properly fund our schools, and we have to provide the necessary resources to our public safety departments. That can all be done through unity, teamwork throughout all of our departments. So together we can make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lambiase. Mr. Bezanson, you have 1 minute for your closing statement.
Well, since I've been on this board since 2004, my hair wasn't gray and falling out, but now it is. It's been a tough road. We've had some hard choices to make. We did it together. We built a new high school, new police station, repairs to the town hall and fire station, within the levy limit, unheard of on the South Shore. We have since refinanced that debt to save the town over the course of 10 years, probably close to $500,000. We've put new street lights in, LED street lights, through a grant, saving $50,000 to $100,000 a year in electricity bills. We've got a pilot program to try to reduce solid waste through the pink bags, if you've heard. Moody's, which I printed out today, gave us a glowing report. Whitman's sound financial position will remain stable, given healthy reserves and conservative management. Moody's, a great credit agency, has said that we're on the right path. We've had struggles. But I thank you for my time on the board, and I would hope you vote for me on May 18th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bezanson. Mr. DiOrio.
Thank you. I want to thank Kevin and Tracy and Eric and WHCA and the Whitman Hanson Express for having this forum. And I also want to thank the three men sitting here, each for their desire to serve, each in their own way. It takes a tremendous amount of fortitude to stand. It takes a tremendous amount of fortitude to do the work that they do, and I thank them for that. A great American statesman once said, "The price of doing the same old thing is far higher than the price of change." And I'm sure we've all heard the adage that insanity is repeating the same action and expecting a different result. The hundreds of people in this community that I've had the pleasure to speak with while I'm going door to door during this campaign have had one overarching message to me. We need change in this government, to put new eyes on old problems and to bring new ideas into this community. So I pose the question to folks heading to the polls on May 18th. If you are willing to keep the same folks in office, do you expect things to change? The answer is clear. Change is needed. Change is coming. A vote for Chris DiOrio is a vote for change. I ask that you make that happen so that we can make that change together. I thank you.
I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the four candidates. Tonight's forum featured the four candidates who are running for two positions on the Whitman Board of Selectmen. Thank you to Brian Bezanson, Scott Lambiase, Chris DiOrio, and Justin Evans. And I want to thank the folks who are viewing and those who are here in attendance to try to get better informed as to where the candidates stand on the issues. And don't forget to get out and vote on May 18th. Remember, those polls do open here at Whitman Town Hall from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Again, that's May 18th. That is a Saturday. Also, if you found this forum informative and helpful, please visit our websites, whitmanhansonexpress.com or whca.tv, and share your thoughts via our contact form. For Tracy Seelye, Eric Dresser, Ryan Tully, and the rest of the WHCA production team, I'm Kevin Tocci, and thank you very much for joining us.